Another case where I get to a sequel nearly a decade later. Hello everyone and welcome to Let's Play Wario Land Super Mario Land 3. Released about a year and a half after Mario Land 2, pretty much worldwide, they effectively went, hey, let's give the final boss of that game his own game, and then that started an entire sub-franchise by complete accident. Starting off, let's access World 1 here with Rice Beach and access Level 1, very creatively named Course 1. The levels are all numbered, there's no actual level names. So Wario Land's a pretty beat-for-beat standard platform with a lot of its stuff. The big thing is the focus, instead of getting to the end of the level, on finding money along the way. Be it in hidden blocks just in the levels, or even by killing enemies certain ways, you need to get a lot of cash to get through the game. On top of that, it also technically influences the ending a little bit. The thing is though, Wario can't exactly kill enemies by jumping on them like Mario can. Instead, he focuses on jumping on them to stun them, and then shoulder tackling them in order to actually kill them. At least with his default power-up. If you get hit like in Mario, you do shrink down to normal Wario, because this is technically Super Wario. With that said, there are of course other ways to take out enemies via Wario's relatively small plethora of power-ups in this one. That right there is what's called a garlic pot. That will turn Wario back into his super phase in the case he has been hit in his normal Wario, or if you get one when you're normal phase, you turn into Bull Wario outright, but there's also a Bull Pot that can do this outright. Bull Wario's big thing is that they are the destroyer of blocks universally. They'll take out enemies in a single shoulder charge no matter what, they can tackle through blocks in one charge, they can also ground pound by jumping and holding the down button, which will destroy enemies completely, albeit they won't drop coins, or destroy blocks completely. This is a good power-up, but it's not my favorite. There's one I tend to stick to for as long as I can if I get it, but we'll talk about that when we get to it. Otherwise, the game controls about as you'd expect. A buttons, jump, and all that, start pauses. Select does nothing unless you're using a very particular cheat code we'll talk about down the line. And a very interesting technique you can use that I'm not even to this day sure is intentional or not. It feels unintentional with the abilities it gives you, but it might just be a quirk of the physics engine technically. If you hold up when you jump much higher and much further. So if there's ever a jump you're stressed out about, do that and you can make it no problem. The reason I think it's unintentional is that there's a lot of cases like that where if there's cases where it feels like you should use it, there's usually a hidden block nearby you can activate or another way to make the jump. I'll have to look more into the research between parts to see if it actually is intentional or not, because it really doesn't feel like it. But you're gonna see me spam the ever-living hell out of it as we go on. Those are choppers down there. We can't do anything about that. If you try to walk around that even at full power, I believe the tunnel of them goes on long enough that you're just not gonna make it through. So not worth trying for right now. We'll have to come back to this level later on. Going over the info on the bottom of the screen, by the way, of course, bottom left is our lives. To the right of that is our coin count. The bottom right is our timer, which is constantly ticking down. Though most levels give you more than enough time, I'd say even on a first playthrough, you're not likely to hear the time is running out jingle very often. The heart, though, that's interesting. For now, though, we got this mole who's gonna make a big coin and throw it into that door. And you might notice there's a little sign behind it that says up and B. If you press up and B, you will generate a big coin. It costs 10 coins to do so, but you need to do that in order to exit any level of the game. So you need at least 10 coins to finish any level. Upon finishing a level, there are two mini games you can do. This one, which is the one I'm going to be doing every time, and the one on the right. The one on the right takes certain amounts of coins and you get extra lives for it. This one is money gambling. It is a straight 50-50 shot 3 times in a row to double or halve your coin count each time. So for instance, with the base 59 coins we entered this version of the minigame with, if I got the doubler each time, I would leave with 472 coins. A good amount towards the amount we need to make by the end of the game. My mentality with this depends on the amount of coins I have to begin with when I get into it. My goal is to get as much money as possible, but I'll usually leave after the first 2 pulls if I win them, as at that point, while I could still get a good amount of money from another doubling on top of that, I don't trust my luck to do that. I'll usually quit while I'm ahead rather than go all in. But there's also cases where, say, I win the first time, I lose the second one. At that point, since I'm still ahead, I don't mind doing the third. I don't try to over-gamble, though, because there's times you really should not. If you lose the first one, maybe go for a second one on top of that to see if you can get your money back, but at that point, I would say it's not worth going for one above that. There are people who've tried to say there are patterns to the gambling minigame, but to my knowledge, it is a direct 50-50, so it is entirely random. Next power-up is a dragon head. When you press B, it shoots fire out of the nose. The fact it's so high up can be a little awkward to aim with, because like cases like that, there are some enemies that are so low to the ground it's hard to hit them with. But with most enemies, it'll take them out no problem. In fact, there's some enemies that can only be killed by this anyway. It's also very good for boss fights in most cases. You can even use it underwater because it just replaces the fire with a, I guess, some sort of turbulent current. The big thing is destroying enemies with this does not get you coins, so while it's a great offensive measure, it's not good for your endgame coin total. There's a checkpoint. Throw a big coin into that, and you will spawn here instead of at the start of the level, in the case you die. I tend to ignore checkpoints pretty much universally throughout the game because I need that money for later. Plus, off the top of my head, there's only like maybe 2 or 3 levels in the game that are long enough where using the checkpoint feels like it would save you enough time. Most of the levels in this game, I'd say, are 3 to 4 minutes long, and that's mostly because Wario is not a very fast guy in this game. He jaunts along at his own little pace, but the levels are smartly designed enough that it doesn't feel like you're moving at a snail's pace. So, the heart counter. Back in Mario Land 1 and 2, and I think even the Donkey Kong game from '95 on the Game Boy, hearts were your extra lives because there was no way to differentiate between a Super Mushroom and a 1-Up Mushroom with the Game Boy's black and white off-greens that they were limited to. But here in Wario Land, that's more or less the case. But instead of getting 1 for every heart you get, every 100 hearts is an extra life. You get hearts via getting them in blocks from one of the minigames in the post-level setup, or by killing enemies. Every enemy you kill is 1. It sounds like it'd be slow, but there's enough hearts in the blocks that you can honestly pile up the lives very quickly in this. On top of the fact there's the extra life minigame that I'll show off eventually in the LP here in the post-level setup. Don't worry about it too much. Don't worry about extra lives either, because either you're going to find a lot anyway, or to begin with, Wario Land isn't exactly a very hard game. Mind you, that's also partially because, at least in my eyes, I came to the game pretty late. My exposure to the Wario Land series did not start with Wario Land 1. I guess technically it started with 6 golden coins, but my Wario Land growing up was Wario Land 4, which is a game that is near and dear to my heart, but oh, there are parts of that I don't like revisiting because it stresses me out, although I love how that game looks. Gorgeous sprite work. Same with Wario Land Shaken, but at that point that's a radically different level of sprite work. So the end game coin counter. Whenever you finish a level, any coins you have, be it from gambling or otherwise, are banked. There are up to 5 digits because you can get up to 5 digits of coins. In order to get technically the best ending of the game, we need to save up 9,699 of those by the time we reach the end of the final level. Which sounds like a lot, but most of the boss levels, especially if you get good luck with the gambling, will give you several hundred anyway at a time, so it's not too hard to grind them out. This here is quicksand. You sink while you're in and you need to jump a lot to get out of it. It's a little sticky to get out of, but it doesn't show up that often anyway. Though there is notably a trick you can do at the end of this level to get its secret exit early. Because some levels in the game do have 2 exits, and this is the first one of them. Similarly to Mario World, they actively are marked on the world map in a little bit of a different way too. If a level only has 1 exit, it is a solid dot. If a level has 2 exits, it is a concentric dot. However, there's some cases where you cannot get the second exit on the first visit to a level, so don't worry about it too much in most cases. With that said, I actually don't remember when I first played Wario Land 1. I want to say it was sometime maybe in middle school or early high school when I was getting really experimental with my early emulation days. Because I probably saw it and went, ooh, I like Wario Land 4, and then I played and like, this is different, but I like this. And then it's kind of just history from there. It's not a game I revisit that often, though. But that's just kind of the case for Mario games, period. Because there are seldom Mario games I would say are bad, but there's also seldom Mario games I feel the urge to revisit any kind of remotely or constantly. Like, I know some people will need to revisit Mario World every year or so. Some people need to revisit Mario 64 or Odyssey relatively regularly. That's not me. Like, for a game for me like that, that's like Mega Man games, or certain Zelda games, or especially Metroid. Which, actually, funny I bring up Samus. Her and Wario actually have a couple of connections I don't think I've really ever brought up on other Metroid LPs, let alone my Wario Land 2 LP from 8 years ago when I was still a kid, effectively. Wario and Samus share a character designer. Hiroji Kiyotake designed them both. But on top of that, the games series that they're in were started by the same person. Gunpei Yokoi, the man who created the Game Boy, the Virtual Boy, the Ultra Hand, that toy that became the mechanic in Tears of the Kingdom, as well as the Wonder Swan, was the producer for both the early Metroid games, of course, but also all of the early Wario Land stuff, effectively. Just kind of an interesting little fact about Nintendo that I don't think it's brought up too often. Like, in some ways, Wario is Samus's distant cousin, and I think there's some funny things you could do with that idea. So at the end of that level, you may have noticed there was a platform at the top we could not reach. That is where the second exit is, but we cannot get that until later. Barring the use of a glitch where you do a high jump out of the quicksand falls, but that's a little tricky to pull off. And is actually tangentially related to another glitch that there's only a few times you can really see in this one, by the way. That is a thwomp. Thwomps and spikes in this game are dangerous because they are instant kill. So hope you have the bull hat for this so you can get through it as quickly as you can, otherwise you might be a little stressed out here. So the glitch I'm talking about, there's only really a couple times it really comes in handy. But if you grab a power-up in mid-air somehow, like say you touch it with your toe while you're jumping over a block, if you hold the A button, Wario effectively does a second jump, and you get some pretty good air out of that if you know where to use it. Do I know where to use it? Probably not as well as some speedrunners, but that's because I'm not a speedrunner. That there to the right of the screen is lava. Lava is also instant kill. However, the top of a thwomp's head is not because it's not covered in spikes. At least I think this is a thwomp. You know, let me look that up, because I know this is one of those games where every enemy does have an official name. That's probably gonna be on Mario Wiki, right? Here we are. Pouncers are what these things are called. So they're probably like the thwomps of cousins. For instance, those bats are demon bats. Creative. So ultimately, I think a reason why this game is kind of easy lies in how the power-up system works, ultimately. As it borrows something from Mario World, even a little bit. In that, in a lot of the other Mario games, 2D-wise at least, when you get a power-up and you get hit, you go down a stage. But that also applies if you're small Mario and you pick up a power-up. You'll usually only go back up a single stage. Mario World's the only one that doesn't do that. It sends you right back to whichever power-up you got. Like, if you get hit and you get a Cape Leaf, you're back to Cape Mario. That applies to this as well. In the case you are small Wario and you get any notable power-up, you go straight back to that top phase, which is really helpful. Also really helpful is actually these pouncers, because if you throw an enemy beneath them and they crush them, they become a 10 coin, which is super spammable. Mind you, I don't remember if enemies respawn if you enter and exit a room over and over again. I don't think they do, but it's worth keeping that in mind. There's actually a more abusable thing you can do with getting big coins to spawn later on, but we'll talk about that then. Also, this LP is entirely recorded, but depending on how I feel after doing like the first part or two, I actually might start speeding up the gambling and end of stage coin tally sections, as frankly, there's times where if you get a lot of coins, you have to watch all those coins get put into your total, and that can take a little bit. For instance, with what I remember counting, the 268 coins I have from the moment they start going in to the point where they finish takes about 9 seconds. That 9 seconds isn't universal, it's entirely dependent on how many coins you have. So that means if I had 4 times the amount of coins for the max amount of coins you could really have there, that's about half a minute of just standing there. So in those cases, I might at least speed those up in future videos. We'll see how I feel, though. Course 5 is our first boss level. At the end of every single world is a boss, of course, albeit they are not exactly very threatening bosses. But in the case you're ever curious, you can also tell you're in a boss level because they actually almost all have the exact same song, which Wario Land's soundtrack is pretty good. There are times, though, where it sounds like a duck farting, which I think is appropriate given the first thing you see in the game if you let the little intro play is a duck on a boat. But there's also times it's a little distracting. But it's also very apparent in this game's soundtrack, as well as some of the sound effects they use. that this is the same team who also developed Metroid 2. They even reused some sound effects from it. There's also a lot of the same sound font from Link's Awakening in here, if you pay close attention, which I think is kind of funny. Sometimes the pouncers don't like to behave when smashing enemies. I think it's because they actively can't smash an enemy unless they're considered in a stun state where they're upside down, though, in specific, at least in that one's case. Be careful once again, though, because pouncers are instant kill if you touch their spikes, so nah, I'm not going to bother going for all those coins if I miss one of them, but I got them all anyway. Conveyor belts are conveyor belts are conveyor belts. Spamming the shoulder tackle can help you move a little faster, but not worth noting all the same. Here's something I frequently forget I can do in this game, though. You'll even see me kind of forget about sometimes. Wario in this game is a lot more athletic than Mario in that he can crouch and move at the same time. At least in a 2D scale, Mario doesn't really get to do that often, if at all, really. So you can crawl through one-tile high passageways, like it's a morph ball from Metroid. I so often forget that, because I usually think of this like it's a Mario game and not a Wario game, which is a trap that can get you to some minor kerfuffles here and again. Because this game plays by its own rules in a lot of regards, even amongst its own series, as I brought up earlier. Those blocks right there we can't get past unless we hit a switch block like that. Sometimes switch blocks switch states in the world, sometimes they do it in the map, period. Depends on which switch block you're hitting, because sometimes they will count as the end of a level. As you can see just there, that's what I was talking about with enemies being a little bit weird with stunning sometimes. This is our first boss fight, a spiked Koopa. Tackle in its underbelly, and it'll spin around for a couple seconds. 3 shots of that, and it's dead. You can even hit it from below while it's spinning up in the air after its left and right finishes. 3 shots and it's done. Bosses in this game, again, aren't much of a threat. It's only really the final boss I'd say is a real threat. Whenever you beat most of the bosses, though, you get a rain of coins from the top middle of the screen. So if you're good about collecting them all, you can get a lot of cash really quickly. And this is why it's really good to get the gambling minigame in boss levels, because even just doubling once is 420 coins. Another mentality I have with the gambling minigame in this one, though, is I will not go for a third gamble or even a second gamble in some cases if I'm already above 800 coins, 750 to 800 on average, as the extra 200-ish coins in that case can come in handy, but it's more worth it in my eyes to be safe and take this 700, 800 plus that I already have. Because at that point, you're already wasting the coins. Like, the max amount of coins you can hold in any given level is 999. So in that case, if I doubled, yes, I should technically have 1680, but like 700 of that would be wasted, so it's not worth it. In my eyes, at least. Sure, min-maxing, it's probably ultimately worth it, but You might notice all these letters to the right of the totals screen. We'll start covering that more starting next part, because on the first visit to World 1, you can find none of those. With that, though, Rice Beach is done, so we get a flag on the overworld, and we move on to World 2, Mount Teapot. Which, after we admire the visuals for a second, we are immediately leaving, because now that we've beaten World 1, levels around here have changed. The tide has moved in, so now Course 1 and Course 3 have some differences. In Course 1, it's largely just that the water's flooded in, some things have moved around because of that, but we can also access that little pathway we saw near the end of the level, where a bunch of coins are. In Course 3's case, though, this is when you're supposed to go get the second exit for it, so we're gonna go do that now. A couple of levels have little revisits like this. Sometimes it's caused by beating another level, in this case like it was beating the world. Other times it's just getting the second exit. The game does enough to actually have a little bit of a spice of life with that, and I appreciate that. Which is kind of interesting, because when I think about Wario Land 1 in specific, the game's mechanic set is not very vast, but it does a good job at being entertaining with what it does, because genuinely a lot of the level design is just really fun to go through with Wario's limited tool set. Also, this is where we can first use swimming controls. Wario swims impeccably well in this, because while, yeah, you can mash the jump button to move a little faster, you have full 8-directional control in the water. It's not like you can only move left or right. And because of that, swimming in water levels in this is honestly pretty fun. It's not really a chore like it is in some other games. If anything, I kind of wish there were a few more of them. So ultimately, at the end of that watered pathway, we got a gigantic block that contains a big heart, which is 3 lives. Big blocks like that, we're also a thing in Mario 3, technically. They will either contain 3-ups like that, or a huge coin. Huge coins are especially what we like to see, because those are 100 coins in one. Not many of them in the game, but worth noting all the same. Worth noting though, while on the first visit to this level, we got free passage through the exit because of the mole that opened it up. This time we have to do it ourselves. Although, something I still don't understand the purpose of, and maybe I'll do some more research to see if I can figure out why. Some levels in the game, the exits are open by default, and that just feels like it's not meant to be, but maybe it's a thing of pacing where they're like, yeah, let's give them some freebies here and there. I'll see if I can find a reason for that moving forward, though. I'll also read the plot from the manual next time, because Wario Land's plot is, kind of funny. But with that, I'm gonna need to end this off here. Thank you guys for watching, and in part 2, we're gonna finish off Rice Beach with the second exit of Course 3 and what unlocks after that, before finally heading on to Mount Teapot and taking care of a good bit of that world while we're at it. See you guys then.